And for this reason, it can and should be called a domestic church. We as men approach the church here to learn about Catholic manhood so we can go home and create the domestic church where we're living. I mean, ultimately, I think that's the reason why we're talking about this, is because the process of evangelization doesn't just happen here, but it happens in the domestic church where you live day in and day out, right? Take care with all watchfulness for the salvation of the members of the household entrusted to you, says St. Augustine. Isn't that true? So what we receive here, we take home into the domestic church because as men, we are responsible for the salvation of those with whom we live. Our wives, our children, like getting them to heaven. Obviously, the Lord does the work of salvation. We know that. Through his grace, we receive salvation. But ultimately, as men, the sacrifice that we make is to get the members of our household to heaven. The reason for this talk. Right now, a few statistics for you. In 1950, the average woman had about 4 children. Okay? In 1950, the average woman had about 4 children. Today, the percentage of birth rate is just a little over 2 children per woman. And in 1980, it was under 2 children per woman. Okay? So 4 children per woman in 1950. Today, we're seeing 2 children per woman. In 1950, 80% of Catholics went to Mass. Okay? 80% of Catholics went to Mass. Today, a little over 20% of Catholics go to Mass. If we look at these statistics, if we look at the drop in the birth rate, it corresponds exactly to the drop in Mass attendance. Why is this? Suddenly, we have empty homes. There's this emptiness within the home, and it's creating not just an emptiness in the domestic church, but an emptiness in the ecclesiastical church. Why are there only 20% of people going to Mass? There's an emptiness in the ecclesiastical church as well. The percentage of men married by 30 in 1940 was 85%. In 1969, the percentage of men married by 30 was 65%. Okay, so we're seeing this radical drop in men being married. Is it any surprise that in 1940, there were well over 10,000 seminarians in the United States, and right now, we have a little over 1,000. Radical drop. Loss of vocation. Loss of vocation in the domestic church. Loss of vocation in the ecclesial church, in the church community. Okay? In 1965, 5% of children were born out of wedlock. 1965. In 2005, 35% of children are born out of wedlock in 2005. Okay? In 1965, there were 500 priestless parishes in the U.S. 500. Today, there are nearly 4,000 priestless parishes in the United States. So just as we have all of these children without fathers in the domestic church, we have a church without fathers in the ecclesiastical church as well. So you see why this is the reason I think for the talk. Because as we see the domestic church plummeting, so too are we any surprised? Like, we are so easy to sit back and say, no one's coming to Mass, no one's getting married in the church, we have no seminarians, blah, blah. Why? Because the man's role in the domestic church to take care with all watchfulness for the salvation of the members of his household entrusted to him has not been lived out. Hence, the reason for a talk on Catholic manhood. So that's like the premise. Do those like statistically, isn't that amazing? Isn't that just like eye-opening how it's so easy to label the issue in the bigger body, because we come here and we encounter all these people. So it's the person sitting next to us fault. So we can walk on him and pretend it's his fault or it's this woman's fault. But suddenly it's like when we look at our own household, there is so much of the issue with Catholic manhood. John Paul II says the future of the world and the church passes through the family. The future of the world, secular society, domestic church, the future of the world and the church passes through the family. The church and the culture needs men. Needs men to stand up and to be men. Can you look up Psalm 112, verses 1 through 6? I forgot to do this beforehand, so Luke's going to do this for me when we're talking. A quick, Saint Therese of Lisieux. You guys have heard of the little flower, right? Saint Therese of Lisieux. Her father was a father, Louis Martin. Have any of you heard of him before? Louis Martin? A couple people have. He attempted to enter a monastery. He earned his living as a watchmaker. He had 9 children, 5 surviving to adulthood. His wife dies fairly young. All of the daughters that survived entered the convent. All of them. And Louis Martin, I just wanted to throw his name out there as an example for men of one who was able to sacrifice himself to have a childlike trust as a father. He's oftentimes unknown today, but he fulfills authentic male leadership. Can you read the scripture? 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Remembered forever. I think that part of the desire of a man within the church is to somehow leave this legacy, to kind of be remembered forever. I think that's why sometimes it's okay of thinking ourselves as, dead to the world, as being walked upon. For if I die, I think it's so interesting, if I died tomorrow,